The wind howled like a living thing, tearing across the barren plains of Kasara 9. Snow swirled in chaotic patterns, driven by gusts so strong they threatened to knock a person off their feet. Captain Alina Ward leaned forward against the storm, her boots sinking into drifts that grew deeper with each step. Her breath came in short, white puffs, condensing and freezing almost instantly on her visor. The scanner on her wrist beeped weakly, struggling against interference, and she cursed under her breath. The storm had come faster than any forecast, faster than any human mind could predict. She had been leading a small scouting party, 3 people including herself, sent to map this uncharted sector. Supplies were limited, and her team had orders to remain within 2 kilometers of the drop pod. Yet now she was alone, separated by a wall of white that turned the familiar terrain into a nightmare of shadows and ghostly shapes. Every step was a calculation. One false move could send her tumbling into a hidden crevasse. "Elena, report," the communicator crackled, but the snowstorm swallowed her voice, leaving only static in reply. She cursed again and shoved it back into her suit. The storm had cut off all contact. Survival depended entirely on her own judgment. She spotted a faint glow in the distance, a soft flicker like a candle struggling against the wind. She squinted, trying to focus. At first, she thought it was a trick of her exhausted mind. Her body ached from cold and exertion, her muscles burning with fatigue. But the glow persisted, small and flickering, and beneath it she could hear something, a soft, irregular sound. A cry. It was weak and fragile, almost swallowed by the wind, but unmistakable. Elena's heart clenched. The last thing she expected to find in this frozen wasteland was life, let alone something so small and defenseless. Survival instincts screamed at her to leave, to find shelter and save herself. Yet another part of her mind, the one that had carried her through countless impossible missions, took over. Compassion, that stubborn human trait, would not allow her to walk away. She moved toward the sound, each step a battle against the gale. Her visor froze over with frost, her gloves numb, her boots threatening to slip with every step. When she finally reached the source, she nearly fell to her knees. Huddled in the snow was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. It was small, no taller than a toddler, with delicate limbs that trembled violently. Its skin glowed faintly under the storm, a pale luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its eyes were enormous, dark, and liquid, reflecting the white chaos around it. The child, or she assumed it was a child, was wrapped in a thin, shredded blanket, barely protecting it from the merciless cold. It looked human in some ways, the shape of its head and its hands, but its features were alien, strange yet painfully familiar in their fragility. Elena's own body shivered, not entirely from the cold. The instinct to act, to help, overpowered every rational thought. She bent down and gently scooped the creature into her arms. It whimpered and clung to her, tiny hands brushing against her chest as though instinctively seeking warmth and safety. "You're okay," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I've got you. You're safe now." The child made a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a sob, and nestled against her body. Its skin felt warm, surprisingly so, even through the layers of her suit. Elena wrapped her thermal blanket around both of them, pressing the creature close. She had a plan of sorts, a dangerous, desperate plan, but it was better than leaving it alone to die. The storm had not relented. Snow whipped at her face, blinding her, and the ground beneath threatened to give way with each step. Her heart pounded not just from exertion but from fear. Carrying another life made every movement heavier, every decision more critical. She had no backup, no help, and no clear idea of where the nearest shelter might be. But turning back was no longer an option. Not while this small, helpless being depended on her. Hours passed, or it could have been minutes. Time lost all meaning in the storm. Her body was beginning to fail, her muscles trembling under the strain. She tripped on a mound of ice and snow, and the child cried out sharply. Panic surged through her. She scrambled to her feet, clutching it tightly, feeling its tiny chest press against her own. She whispered soothing words she didn't know if it could understand, stroking its glowing head. As exhaustion set in, her mind raced. The mission objectives, her survival, the team, everything seemed secondary to the fragile life she carried. It was reckless, yes, but Alina had faced worse odds and survived. Her mind began to think in terms of strategies. Conserve energy, find natural shelter, melt snow for water, ration her remaining supplies. She scanned the terrain for any sign of rocks, overhangs, or structures that could offer even the faintest protection. Then she saw it, a ridge rising slightly above the storm, jagged rocks partially exposed. It wasn't much, but it would be better than nothing. Clinging to the warmth of the child in her arms, she staggered toward it, slipping on hidden ice patches, falling more than once but always pressing onward. Every step brought a new danger: sharp rocks, unseen holes, sudden blasts of wind that could knock her off balance. But she moved with determination, driven by a force far stronger than fear. Finally, she reached a small alcove formed by boulders. It was barely large enough for them to huddle inside, but it offered some shelter from the full fury of the storm. She laid the child down gently, adjusting the blanket so it could share warmth with her. The creature looked up at her, large eyes wide and glimmering, as if it understood that she had risked everything to save it. Alina shivered, the cold gnawing at her, but a strange sense of satisfaction filled her. This was what made humans extraordinary, she thought, the ability to act out of compassion even when survival was at stake. The storm raged outside, but inside that small alcove, she felt a fragile but unbreakable bond forming. She dug into her pack for whatever supplies remained. Rations were sparse, half a protein bar, a small water flask, but she shared them carefully, watching the child mimic her movements with startling precision. It ate slowly, its glowing hands leaving faint traces on the wrappers. Alina smiled despite the situation. She didn't know this species, didn't know its needs, but she knew the basic language of care, and that was enough. Hours stretched into an indistinct blur. She kept talking to the child, describing the storm, the alien terrain, her own memories, anything to keep it calm. Sometimes it responded with sounds, high-pitched and musical, almost like laughter. Alina realized that in its own way it was communicating, learning from her, forming trust. That trust became a lifeline, a reminder of why she had risked everything. Sleep was impossible. Every sound outside, the crack of ice, the howl of the wind, kept her on edge. But even in the exhaustion, she marveled at the child's resilience. Alone, it would have perished, but together they survived. She felt a fierce pride. Not in conquering the storm, not in charting new territory, but in choosing to act humanly in a universe that often rewarded cruelty and indifference. When the wind lessened slightly near dawn, Alina took stock. Her body was numb, her face streaked with frost, but the child slept peacefully beside her. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to see her team again, to report this miraculous encounter. But she quickly pushed the thought away. That was later. Survival still came first. She had to find proper shelter, warmth, and a way to communicate for help. Her mind worked quickly, formulating a route to the nearest canyon walls. They could offer better protection, perhaps even a chance to signal for help if the storm cleared completely. The journey would be treacherous, but she was not alone. She had this small being relying on her, and that made every risk worth taking. By midday, the snowstorm had abated enough for her to move cautiously. The landscape was a chaotic mix of white and gray, jagged rocks poking through frozen drifts. Every step required careful consideration. She carried the child in a makeshift sling against her chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her own. It made her move faster, sharper, more aware. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in months, every sense heightened by the need to protect, to endure, to survive for another. The hours passed slowly, each step a test of endurance. She slipped on hidden ice, slid dangerously close to hidden crevasses, and once had to fend off a native predator, a large, wolf-like creature with crystalline fur that shimmered in the daylight. She fought it off with a flare gun and a well-aimed throw of a thermal pack, but she felt no pride. She felt relief, relief that both she and the child survived. By nightfall, they reached the canyon walls. A narrow overhang offered enough shelter to keep the wind at bay. Alina set up a makeshift bedding using the remaining thermal blankets, pressing the child close for warmth. They were both exhausted, yet she knew this was only the beginning. The storm might have slowed, but danger was far from gone. As she drifted into a light, wary sleep, she thought about the strange being beside her. Its luminescent skin seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat, a silent testament to the fragile bond they had formed. She smiled despite the cold and fatigue. Humanity had many weapons: intelligence, technology, strength. But tonight it was compassion that saved both of them. That, she realized, was the true essence of being human. And tomorrow she would continue to fight, not just for her survival, but for the life of the small, crying alien who had reminded her what it meant to care. The first light of dawn reflected off the icy canyon walls, casting a pale glow over the frozen landscape. Captain Alina Ward stirred awake, her body stiff from the cold and the long night spent shielding the alien child. The small being remained asleep beside her, nestled against her chest, its faintly glowing skin dimmed by the shadows of the overhang. For a moment, Alina simply watched it, marveling at the fragile perfection of a life so unlike her own, yet unmistakably vulnerable and real. The storm had subsided, but the environment remained unforgiving. The wind had calmed to a steady howl, carrying shards of ice and snow across the canyon floor. Alina wrapped herself and the child tightly in the remaining thermal blanket and surveyed their surroundings. The canyon provided some shelter, but it was narrow, uneven, and full of hidden hazards. She would need to move carefully to continue their journey to the nearest research outpost, a settlement barely mapped and over 10 kilometers away. Alina checked her supplies. Rations were critically low: half of a protein bar, a small water flask, and the emergency heat pack in her backpack. Her comms device was still dead, likely fried by the storm's interference. The situation was dire, but giving up was not an option. She had chosen to protect the child, and now that choice carried responsibility she could not abandon. The child stirred and made a soft, high-pitched sound that echoed faintly against the canyon walls. Alina gently lifted it, feeling the pulse of life beneath its glowing skin. She smiled softly. "It's time to move," she whispered. "We have to find better shelter. You can trust me, okay?" The child's large eyes blinked slowly as if acknowledging her words. Every step forward was treacherous. Ice crunched beneath her boots, snow drifted into hidden crevices, and jagged rocks threatened to cut or trip her. The alien child clung to her, small hands gripping her suit, its warmth a strange comfort against the cold. As they moved, Alina spoke to it constantly, describing what she saw: the shapes of the canyon, the direction of the sun, and even her own past experiences. Talking was not just a way to keep the child calm. It reminded her that she was still human, still alive, and still capable of hope in a world that had shown her only danger. Hours passed, and the canyon became a maze of sharp cliffs and narrow passages. At one point, a sudden ice quake rattled the ground, sending small rocks and shards of ice tumbling around them. Alina dropped to her knees instinctively, shielding the child with her body. She felt the tremors pass beneath her, the canyon groaning like a living creature before slowly calming. The child whimpered softly against her chest, and she kissed its glowing forehead. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe with me." The journey demanded every ounce of human ingenuity and instinct she possessed. At one steep section, a frozen waterfall blocked their path. Alina could see the jagged ice above and the sheer drop below. She studied the formation, noting the slight ridges and cracks. Using her ice axe and a short rope from her pack, she began to climb carefully, testing each foothold before committing her weight. The child, sensing her determination, clung tightly, almost mirroring her focus. It was a silent partnership, human courage guiding alien trust. As they reached the top, a harsh wind swept across the cliff, threatening to throw them off balance. Alina pressed the child against her chest, tightening her grip. A loose sheet of ice cracked under her foot, sending a jolt of panic through her. She froze for a moment, heart pounding, but the child did not scream. Its trust in her was evident, a fragile but powerful connection that gave her strength. With a final push, she leveraged her weight and scrambled to safer ground. By midday, hunger and fatigue gnawed at her. She rationed the tiny portion of food she had left, breaking it into tiny pieces so both she and the child could eat. The alien mimicked her actions almost instantly, chewing slowly, its glowing hands moving in careful coordination. Alina marveled at its intelligence. She did not know the species, did not know its natural instincts, but it was learning from her, adapting and responding to human behavior. For the first time, she realized that her choice to act with compassion was more than a moral decision. It was creating a bridge between two species. The canyon walls began to narrow, forcing them into a tight passage. Shadows stretched across the snow, and Alina's sharp eyes caught movement out of the corner of her visor. A creature emerged, large and wolf-like, with crystalline fur that reflected the pale sunlight. Its eyes glowed a faint red, and it growled, low and threatening. Alina froze, calculating her options. There was no time to run, no place to hide. The creature advanced cautiously, sniffing the air. Alina gripped her flare gun and aimed carefully. She could not risk missing, every second counted. She fired a single flare, hitting the ice near the creature. The light startled it, causing it to retreat slightly, but it did not flee entirely. The creature was intelligent, assessing threats, waiting for the right moment to strike. Alina's heart pounded. She could not let the child be exposed. Using her environmental knowledge, she kicked a loose rock toward the creature, then shouted loudly, hoping to intimidate it. The plan worked. The creature hesitated, unsure of its approach, giving Alina enough time to back away toward a wider section of the canyon. Once in safer terrain, she increased the distance between them. The creature finally gave a warning snarl before retreating into the shadows. Alina exhaled, her body trembling, the child safe against her chest. "See," she whispered, smoothing the luminescent skin along its back. "We can survive this together." As night fell, the temperature dropped even further. Alina found a shallow cave in the canyon wall, just enough to shield them from the wind. She lit a small, controlled flame inside her emergency heater, careful to prevent an accident. The child watched the flickering light, its glowing eyes reflecting the tiny flames. Alina fed it a few more bites of the protein bar, and it responded with soft coos, almost a sound of gratitude. She laughed quietly. "You're learning fast," she said, "but don't get used to eating my rations too quickly." Exhaustion finally began to claim her. Her body was stiff, her fingers numb, and her eyelids heavy. Yet she felt a strange warmth in her chest, a sense of purpose stronger than any fatigue. She had made a choice, one that could have cost her life, and it had bonded her with a creature completely foreign, dependent on her for survival. Humanity had many strengths, but this, she realized, was its greatest. The ability to act with compassion even when danger loomed, to prioritize the lives of others, to forge connections across unimaginable divides. In the quiet of the cave, Alina drifted into a fitful sleep, the child curled against her, glowing faintly in the dark. Dreams came filled with ice storms, endless canyons, and strange creatures, but always with the same theme: survival through courage, compassion, and ingenuity. When she awoke hours later, the child was awake too, staring at her with large, curious eyes. It made a soft sound, almost like a laugh. Elena smiled. "Good morning," she whispered. "Time to move again. We have a long way to go." The next leg of their journey was even more dangerous. They had to traverse an open plateau to reach a distant ridge, where she hoped to find shelter or even a signal for help. The plateau was exposed, and the wind had returned, gusting sharply across the frozen plain. Elena wrapped the child in the thermal blanket and pressed it against her chest. Each step was a struggle, the snow ankle-deep in places, the wind pushing against her like a physical barrier. But every struggle was worth it, because she was no longer alone, and neither was the child. Hours passed with painstaking slow progress. The child began responding to Elena's voice and gestures, copying her motions instinctively. It learned to brace against the wind, to step carefully on ice, and even to help distribute weight when Elena had to climb small inclines. The realization struck her profoundly. Humanity's strength was not just in survival alone, but in teaching, in guiding, and in inspiring trust. The child's growing understanding of human behavior was a testament to the potential for connection between species. At one point, a hidden fissure opened beneath her boot, sending a jolt of fear through her. She caught herself just in time, clutching the child tightly. Her pulse raced, but she managed to pull herself to stable ground. The child mirrored her movements, gripping her suit, and for a moment, Elena felt a surge of pride. They were learning from each other, surviving together, becoming stronger through the bond they had forged in the storm. Finally, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, they reached the base of the distant ridge. The plateau behind them stretched endlessly, white and forbidding, a silent testament to their struggle. Elena collapsed briefly, letting the child rest against her chest. The ridge offered some promise, rocks that could shield them from wind, snow that could be melted for water, and the possibility of a vantage point to signal for help. As she prepared to climb, Elena reflected on everything that had brought them here. Every moment of danger, every decision to act with compassion had shaped their journey. She had chosen empathy over self-preservation, and in doing so, had discovered a strength deeper than any physical endurance. Humanity's true power lay not in dominance or technology, but in courage, care, and connection, even in the harshest conditions of an alien world. With the child secure against her chest, she began the climb up the ridge, every step a testament to resilience and hope. The wind howled, the shadows lengthened, but Elena pressed on, guided by a single truth: they would survive together. The alien child, once crying and alone in the storm, had become her reason to keep moving, her purpose in a frozen world that offered nothing but danger. And as the first stars began to glimmer above the icy horizon, Elena knew that no storm, no predator, and no obstacle could break the bond they had forged. It was fragile, yes, but unbreakable in its own way. A bond that would carry them through the next chapter of survival, discovery, and human courage. The wind on the ridge was relentless, cutting through Elena's suit like tiny shards of ice. The small alien child shivered against her chest, its luminescent skin flickering faintly with every gust. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on her muscles and the gnawing hunger in her stomach, Elena pressed on. The ridge offered the only chance of safety, a high ground where she could see potential shelter or even signal for help if conditions allowed. She had no guarantees, only determination. Each step was a battle. The snow beneath her feet shifted unpredictably, sometimes crumbling into hidden cracks that could have sent both of them plummeting into the canyon below. She used her ice axe and rope with precision, testing each handhold and foothold before committing her weight. The child clung to her, arms wrapped tightly, small hands gripping the edges of her suit. Its trust fueled her determination, reminding her why she had risked everything in the storm. She was no longer moving just for herself. She was moving for another life entirely dependent on her survival skills. Hours passed slowly. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the frozen ridges. Every movement required careful calculation. Alina's body ached with fatigue, every muscle burning, yet she found strength she didn't know she had. The bond with the child had grown. She had begun to recognize its subtle gestures, the way it responded to her voice, the slight movements of its hands when she guided it. The alien was learning from her, adapting to the harsh environment, and in some ways teaching her patience and empathy she had never fully realized. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed across the ridge. Alina froze, heart pounding, and looked down. The snow below her had shifted, forming a hidden ice crevasse. Her boots had narrowly avoided it, but the reminder of danger was immediate. She swallowed her fear and adjusted the child in her arms. "Careful," she whispered. "We're not done yet." Almost there. The child made a soft cooing sound, almost like reassurance, and nestled against her. They pressed onward, moving slowly but steadily. The ridge gradually widened, giving them more stable footing. Alina scanned the horizon with her visor's enhanced optics, searching for any signs of shelter. In the distance, a faint glimmer of artificial light caught her eye, a cluster of lights that could only mean the research outpost. Relief surged through her, but she did not allow herself to relax. The terrain between them and safety was still treacherous. Night fell quickly, bringing with it an even harsher cold. Alina used a small heat pack to warm the child and herself, sharing the warmth carefully. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she rationed the remaining protein bar and water, feeding the child first. The alien mimicked her gestures, eating carefully, showing a level of intelligence and adaptability that fascinated her. In that moment, she realized that humanity's true strength lay not just in survival, but in teaching, guiding, and forming bonds, even across species. The final obstacle was a steep icy slope leading directly to the outpost. Alina examined it, noting handholds and potential risks. It would be dangerous, but there was no alternative. She secured the child against her chest with the thermal blanket and began the climb. Each movement required precision, balance, and courage. Loose ice threatened to slide beneath her boots, and the wind threatened to knock them off balance. But Alina had faced impossible odds before, and she refused to fail now. Halfway up, a sudden gust nearly toppled her. She pressed the child against her, using every ounce of strength to anchor herself. The alien clung tightly, small hands gripping her suit as if understanding the danger. Alina took a deep breath, calming herself, and continued. Step by step she ascended, muscles screaming, mind focused solely on the path ahead. Finally, they reached the top. Alina collapsed onto the snow, gasping for air. The outpost lights were closer now, brighter and unmistakably real. She looked down at the child, whose glowing eyes reflected the distant lights. It made a small, joyful sound, and Alina laughed softly, tears freezing on her cheeks. They had survived together. The ridge behind them, once a wall of insurmountable danger, now stood as a testament to human courage and compassion. As she approached the outpost, her presence triggered alarms. Security drones hovered, scanning the area. Alina waved, shouting, and the drones recognized her as a human life form. Within moments, personnel emerged, rushing toward her. They were astonished by the sight, a human carrying an alien child, both glowing faintly in the night. Alina handed the child to the medical team, who immediately took it to a secure examination area. The scientists were amazed. The child's species was unknown, its biology unlike anything documented before. Yet it had survived the storm and bonded with a human, showing intelligence, adaptability, and trust. Alina observed from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. Her decision to act with compassion had not only saved a life but created a connection that transcended worlds. One of the lead researchers approached her. "Captain Ward," he said, voice filled with awe, "we've never seen anything like this. How did you find it?" Alina smiled faintly, exhaustion and relief mingling. "It was crying in the storm," she said simply. "I couldn't leave it behind. It was alone and helpless. I just chose to help." The researcher nodded slowly. "You saved it, and in doing so, you've shown something remarkable. Humanity's greatest strength isn't technology or weapons. It's courage, empathy, and the ability to protect life, even when the odds are against you." Alina allowed herself a small moment of rest, leaning against a wall. The child, now safe in a controlled environment, was beginning to respond to the researcher's gentle care. It made soft cooing sounds and reached out toward them, a sign of growing trust. Alina watched, realizing that her choice to act humanly had changed the course of not just her life, but potentially the lives of many. The night stretched on. Alina was exhausted beyond measure, yet she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had faced a merciless storm, navigated treacherous terrain, and protected a life far smaller and weaker than her own. And through it all, she had discovered the true power of humanity, the ability to act with compassion, to teach, and to inspire trust, even across the boundaries of species. In the quiet hours before dawn, she reflected on everything that had led to this moment. Every risk she had taken, every decision to prioritize the child's safety over her own, had been guided by a force she could not ignore. It was not just instinct. It was humanity's defining characteristic, courage born from empathy, strength born from care. The first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, illuminating the outpost and the surrounding canyon. Alina looked out over the frozen landscape, now calm and silent after the storm's fury. She thought of the journey ahead, the reports, the scientific studies, the questions that would inevitably follow. But more importantly, she thought of the bond she had formed with the child, a connection that transcended language, species, and distance. A nurse approached her, offering a warm drink and a blanket. Alina accepted gratefully, wrapping herself and letting the warmth seep into her frozen body. She sipped the liquid slowly, savoring the simple comfort. The alien child, now resting in a secure habitat, looked up at her with wide eyes, a soft glow pulsing faintly in response to her presence. It was a reminder that life, no matter how fragile or foreign, was worth protecting. Later, in a secure briefing room, Alina recounted the events to the research team. Every detail mattered: the storm, the canyon, the hazards, the child's reactions, and the decisions she had made. The scientists listened intently, taking notes, asking questions, and marveling at the resilience of both human and alien. Alina spoke clearly, emphasizing the bond of trust and compassion that had made survival possible. By the end of the session, it was clear. Her actions had changed perceptions of human capability. She had demonstrated that heroism was not measured solely by physical endurance or tactical skill, but by the courage to act with empathy when it mattered most. The child's survival was a testament to that principle, a living proof of what humanity could achieve when guided by conscience as well as intellect. Even as the outpost settled into the routine of securing the alien child and preparing for further study, Alina found a quiet moment to herself. She looked out over the canyon, now serene in the morning light. Memories of the storm, the climb, the hidden crevasses, and the moments of sheer terror came flooding back. And yet, amidst the danger and fear, one constant stood out: the choice she had made to act with compassion. That choice had defined everything that followed. The child's soft cooing drifted through the observation window, and Alina smiled. She realized that in saving this being, she had preserved something essential about humanity itself: the ability to care, to protect, and to act with courage even when survival was uncertain. That was a lesson not just for her but for all who would learn of this story. As she prepared to rest, she reflected on what lay ahead. The research would be groundbreaking, the questions endless. But for now there was safety, warmth, and life. A fragile, glowing life that had survived against impossible odds. And it had survived because a human had chosen compassion over survival, proving once again that humanity's greatest power was not in domination or technology, but in empathy and courage. Alina drifted into a deep sleep, the memory of the storm lingering in her mind. But unlike before, it was no longer a symbol of fear. It was a reminder of what she had endured, what she had protected, and what she had accomplished. The alien child, now resting peacefully, was a living testament to the strength of human compassion, a bond forged in the harshest conditions and one that would endure, a shining example of humanity at its finest. And when she awoke again, the sun had risen fully, illuminating the icy plains of Kasara 9. The storm was gone, but the memory of it remained, etched into her soul. She had faced the impossible and prevailed, not through weapons or strength alone, but through courage, care, and the unyielding choice to protect life. Humanity had endured once more, and in the process had shown the galaxy the true meaning of heroism.